Sometime in the thick hush of a storm-scarred morning, Rosie Harper gripped the steering wheel as her old Honda crept down the forgotten dirt road toward the bunker that was supposed to save her and her daughter. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring the world outside, but nothing could blur the fear tightening in her chest. Lily slept curled beside her, small and fragile, unaware of how close they were to running out of options or gas. The letter in Rosie's pocket, that strange inheritance from an uncle she barely remembered, felt like the last lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. When the clearing finally opened, and the rust-eaten bunker rose from the earth like a buried secret refusing to stay hidden, Rosie stepped out into the wild silence and felt possibility stir beneath her exhaustion. With Lily clinging to her coat, she forced open the ancient metal doors, the screech echoing through the clearing like the beginning of something they didn't yet understand. Inside the cold darkness lay cracked concrete, stale air, and the faintest shape of hope. It wasn't a home. Not yet. But as she aimed her small flashlight into the shadows, she told herself what she desperately needed to believe, that this place might be the beginning of their second chance. The stairs groaned beneath their feet as they stepped into the bunker's hollow heart, a forgotten chamber of dust-covered furniture, abandoned tools, and the strange stillness of a life left unfinished. Rosie's breath trembled as her light swept across shelves lined with jars, boxes, and aging equipment. Nothing was polished. Nothing was welcoming. But nothing was broken beyond repair either, and that alone made her pulse steady. Lily clung to her hand, wide-eyed, whispering questions Rosie wasn't ready to answer, yet she forced a smile anyway. They set down their few belongings and began the slow work of claiming the space. Dust swirled around them as they swept, hauled debris, opened doors to rooms that hadn't felt footsteps in decades. A bedroom with crumbling cots. A workshop with a wall of carefully arranged tools. A tiny bathroom that no longer worked but held potential. As the hours passed, the bunker shifted from eerie ruin to possibility. By sunset, Rosie had coaxed the old stove to life, feeding it splintered wood until warmth spilled through the room like a long-lost friend returning home. Lily fell asleep beside the fire, cheeks flushed pink for the first time in weeks. Rosie watched her child's steady breathing and felt a spark ignite inside her, fragile but real. They were no longer in a parking lot car chased by hunger and cold. They had walls. They had shelter. And maybe, just maybe, they had a future. At sunrise on the fourth day, as golden light filtered through the bunker's open doors, Lily uncovered something that changed everything. A metal hatch hidden behind a dusty filing cabinet. Rosie knelt beside her, heart racing as she unlatched the small door and revealed stacks of carefully wrapped packages preserved against time itself. Journals bound in leather, rolled blueprints, letters sealed with her uncle's handwriting, and behind them heavy metal boxes secured with combination locks. Sitting on the workshop floor, Rosie opened the first journal and found herself reading the mind of a man she barely knew. Clayton Merrick had built this bunker not as a solitary refuge, but as the prototype for a community shelter, a blueprint of survival he hoped towns across the country would one day adopt. Page after page, he wrote about disasters he'd witnessed, people left with no safe place to go, systems that always failed the most vulnerable. He built this place to prove something. And to help someone he believed would eventually need it. Rosie wiped tears from the pages as she read his final message, a plea for whoever found the journals to carry his mission forward. For the first time since the storm destroyed their old life, Rosie felt something fierce rise through her grief. A purpose waiting to claim her. Unlocking the metal boxes took days, but when Rosie found the combinations hidden in Clayton's journal margins, the contents left her breathless. Seeds, hundreds of sealed packets meant for rebuilding food supplies, manuals on everything from water systems to solar power, tools wrapped with care, and a list of names, engineers, volunteers, organizers, people her uncle believed in. The bunker wasn't just a shelter. It was a lifeline designed to multiply. But Rosie knew she couldn't build Clayton's dream alone. So she gathered what courage she had left, drove to the nearest town, and pinned flyers anywhere people might stop long enough to read. She expected pity, silence, rejection. Instead, a week later, a dented pickup truck growled into the clearing, and an elderly man stepped out, lean, weathered, and steady as a mountain. Walter Pierce introduced himself with a quiet smile, saying he'd built homes his whole life and was looking for something meaningful to spend his days on. When Rosie showed him Clayton's blueprints, Walter nodded with the certainty of someone who saw not ruin but potential. Together they began transforming the bunker from a forgotten relic into something alive. Water systems, solar panels, salvaged materials turned into walls and beds, and word spread. A food bank volunteer, a young couple living in a van, a teenager searching for purpose. One by one, people found the bunker and stayed. Weeks turned into months as the once desolate bunker grew into a heartbeat of shared work, shared meals, and shared hope. The greenhouse rose first, built from scavenged windows and reclaimed wood. Lily planted the first seeds, her small hands pressing life into the soil as though she'd been born to do it. Water flowed from the new well. Solar lights burned in the night. Rooms expanded, hallways strengthened, and the bunker transformed into a place where fear loosened its grip. Rosie worked alongside Walter, Maria, Kevin, Ruth, and the growing circle of volunteers who arrived seeking shelter, purpose, or simply a place to belong. And the changes didn't stay inside the concrete walls. When a sudden flood hit the nearby town of Millbrook, families arrived desperate and shaken. Rosie opened the doors without hesitation. For a week the bunker held 15 people, mothers, fathers, children, each given warmth, food, and safety. And in the quiet moments between handing out blankets and calming frightened kids, Rosie realized something profound. The bunker was no longer just hers. It belonged to anyone who needed a place where dignity could grow again. Clayton's mission had awakened, and the community, drawn by something deeper than charity, kept coming back, building, planting, repairing, dreaming. The bunker's light began to spread, and people started calling it something new: the Clayton Merrick Community Resilience Center. The center flourished, evolving from a single bunker into a network of support. Donations arrived. Grants were approved. Volunteers became teachers, offering classes in first aid, gardening, carpentry, budgeting, anything that could help people rebuild from the ground up. Rosie, once homeless and terrified of losing her daughter, now stood at the heart of a movement she hadn't planned but had grown into with every choice she made. Lily thrived in school, proudly telling classmates she lived in a place built to help people start over. The community grew so strong that when a National Resilience Foundation visited, they asked Rosie to help train other cities to build centers modeled after Clayton's design. A documentary crew arrived next. Then journalists. The story of a $670 bunker sparking a national movement traveled farther than Rosie ever imagined. But the most powerful moment came 5 years after she first unlocked the rusted door. Attorney Hutchkins arrived with an envelope Clayton had left for her. A letter meant to be opened only by someone who had stayed long enough to understand the purpose of this place. Inside was the deed to the entire property, gifted to Rosie with one request: keep it open for everyone who needs hope. Standing at the bunker entrance, Rosie felt her uncle's presence in every stone, every tool, every seed, every life touched. He had trusted her before she ever believed in herself. Years passed, and Lily, no longer the frightened child who clung to Rosie in the storm, stepped into leadership beside her mother. She created programs for kids, helped families transition into long-term housing, and planned expansions with the confidence of someone raised inside a mission bigger than herself. The center grew into a campus. New buildings, classrooms, a memorial garden filled with plants from every season. And at its heart stood Clayton's original bunker, preserved and honored, the place where everything began. On the 10th anniversary, hundreds gathered to celebrate: former residents, volunteers, donors, families, friends. Some had arrived broken. Others had arrived lonely. Many had arrived with nothing. All had left changed. Rosie walked through the greenhouse, now bursting with rows of thriving plants, and thought of Marcus, the once-lost teenager now studying agriculture. She saw Kevin and Maria running their own business. She saw Sarah, the young mother who once arrived pregnant and terrified, now a social worker helping others find safety. This wasn't just a center anymore. It was a legacy. One tiny inheritance had become a movement. One desperate moment had grown into a lighthouse for anyone lost in life's darkest storms. And Rosie, once buried in grief and fear, had become what Clayton always believed she could be: a keeper of hope. On quiet evenings, Rosie walked alone to the top of the hill where the wind moved softly through the grass, and the center glowed warm beneath her. She thought about the woman she once was: exhausted, homeless, gripping a steering wheel while her daughter slept beside her. She thought about the letter that had seemed like a cruel joke: a bunker worth $670, a structure the world saw as nearly worthless. Yet here she stood, surrounded by buildings, gardens, families, and futures, all born from that forgotten inheritance. She whispered her gratitude into the night, knowing Clayton's dream lived through every life changed here, and in every resilient center across the country inspired by his design. As stars brightened overhead, she stepped back inside, greeted by laughter drifting through the halls, the sound of hope alive and growing. And to everyone listening to this story, to everyone who believes in second chances and the power of people coming together, Rosie's voice reaches across the years with one final truth: the smallest seed of hope can grow into something that saves lives. If this story moved you, let your voice be part of its legacy. Like, comment, and subscribe so more people can find their way to stories of strength and rebirth. And before you go, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now as you hear this story?